So friends, we just learned that articles of impeachment are being drafted by a bipartisan team of congressmen to impeach Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche for their clear, obvious, and inarguable violation of federal law, the Epstein Transparency Act, a violation that is serving as a cover-up. So friends, Donald Trump's Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is violating federal law every minute of every day that she refuses to disclose the Epstein files, as is required by legislation that was signed into law by Donald Trump himself. Now, I want to start with the new reporting, and I'm going to read a good bit of it because I want you to hear just how angry, how furious members of Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, are about Bondi's clear violation of law and how it is serving as a cover-up. This from The Guardian. Headline: Outrage and legal threats. Trump Justice Department slammed after limited Epstein files released. Lawmakers voice frustration over heavy redactions and the apparent removal of files from government website. And that article begins: Donald Trump's Justice Department was hit with legal threats and scathing outrage after authorities released a limited, heavily redacted trove of Jeffrey Epstein files in an apparent violation of the law mandating the near-complete disclosure of these documents by Friday. This quote from Representative Ro Khanna, who was the co-sponsor of the bill, the Epstein Transparency Act, quote, "The Justice Department's document dump this afternoon does not comply with Thomas Massie and my Epstein Transparency Act." Ro Khanna, the California Democrat congressman who co-authored the law requiring full disclosure of all Epstein files by 19 December, said in a video statement, quote, "It is an incomplete release with too many redactions. Thomas Massie and I are exploring all options." He also said, among them, possible impeachment of Justice Department officials, finding them in contempt of Congress. Khanna also floated the possibility of referring for prosecution those who are obstructing justice. And this quote from Republican Representative Thomas Massie, quote, "Unfortunately, today's document release by AG Bondi and Deputy AG Todd Blanche grossly fails to comply with both the spirit and the letter of the law that Donald Trump signed just 30 days ago. Representative Ro Khanna is correct." Massie, a Kentucky member of Congress and co-author of this legislation, said on X, quote, "A future Justice Department could convict the current AG and others because the Epstein Files Transparency Act is not like a congressional subpoena, which expires at the end of each Congress," Massie said at another point. Frustrations mounted on Saturday as the Justice Department released some new files, including transcripts, while also removing more than a dozen others from its website related to Epstein with no explanation. At least 16 files disappeared from the department's public webpage, according to an Associated Press tally. The documents included images of paintings depicting nude women and one showing a series of photographs along a credenza in the drawers. In that image, inside a drawer, among other photos, is a photograph of Trump alongside Epstein, Melania Trump, and Epstein's longtime associate, Ghislaine Maxwell. Trump's Justice Department was required to release all investigative files involving the late financier by 19 December under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The legislation does allow for records to be withheld or redacted if their disclosure would imperil present criminal investigations, threaten national security, or identify Epstein's victims, but otherwise it mandates disclosure of everything else. New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was among the bipartisan chorus of lawmakers slamming Trump's Justice Department, including the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi and the FBI Director Kash Patel for the document's lackluster rollout. Quote, "Now, the cover-up is out in the open. This is far from over. Everyone involved will have to answer for this," Ocasio-Cortez, a New York Democrat, said on X on Friday. Quote, "Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, whole administration, protecting a bunch of rapists and pedophiles because they have money, power, and connections. Bondi, should resign tonight. Now, of course, AG Bondi won't resign tonight, but here's an important update from a brand new interview that my friend and partner in the Legal Breakdown, Brian Tyler Cohen, just conducted with Representative Ro Khanna. Quote, Representative Massey and I are drafting articles of impeachment as we speak about Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche. Okay, friends, a few takeaways. First of all, there is no argument, no plausible argument, no implausible argument, no argument whatsoever that Pam Bondi has complied with the federal law to disclose all of the Epstein files, with a few very narrow, limited exceptions, like to protect the identity of victims. Some of the reporting says that, given this document dump, it may actually account for less than 1% of all of the Epstein files. And yet, friends, back in July, do you remember what Pam Bondi was having Kash Patel's FBI do before there was ever a law requiring the disclosure of all of the Epstein files? Here is what the FBI was busy doing. Headline, FBI personnel were told to flag Epstein files mentioning Trump, Senate Democrat. Senate Democratic Whip Dick Durbin pressed Justice Department leadership about their handling of the files related to the federal investigation into the late Jeffrey Epstein, including reports that FBI personnel were instructed to flag any records that mentioned President Donald Trump. In a series of oversight letters written to Attorney General Pam Bondi, FBI Director Kash Patel, and FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, Durbin questioned Bondi about contradictions in her public statements on the case, Patel about reports that he was pressured by Bondi to place 1,000 personnel on 24-hour shifts to mine roughly 100,000 Epstein-related records, and Bongino about reported disputes among Trump officials about the lack of transparency in their handling of the high-profile case. Friends, think about that. Before there was ever a law requiring the disclosure of anything, Pam Bondi is pressuring the FBI, directing the FBI to put 1,000 agents on the task of scouring the Epstein files for references to Donald Trump, obviously in an attempt to protect Trump. And now, when there is a law requiring disclosure of all of the Epstein files, it seems like Bondi's attitude is, screw that. I'm not putting sufficient resources into that endeavor. I'm not going to comply with the federal law. You know, friends, that is abject lawlessness by Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche. And let's face it, they're not going to hold themselves accountable for violating federal law. They're the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General. Do you think they're going to launch, an investigation into their own misconduct? Their own violation of a federal statute? Of course not. But when the rule of law comes back into the light of day, and it will when this dark chapter in our nation's history is over, this Donald Trump lawlessness and unconstitutionality, they will need to be held accountable for their violations of federal law.